Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Cast me, Sarah, female 5'11", Mike, friend and store manager Chief Johnson, my boss entitled Jerk, the one who lost his car. Okay, some background. I worked as a fire investigator for an independent fire department. As an investigator, I held the rank of lieutenant, and my base was a large station housing 2 engines, a newer 110-foot tower ladder truck, relevant later, a chief's vehicle, and a utility truck. At the station, cooking duties rotated among firefighters, and on this particular day, it was Chief Johnson's turn to prepare the meals. My friend Mike worked as the general manager of a small grocery store. There was a long, empty space in front of the store marked with a sign that read, "Emergency Vehicles Only. Enter the entitled Jerk." This guy had a fancy BMW, and he always parked in the aforementioned spot every week. Mike had warned the entitled Jerk multiple times not to park there, but he would respond arrogantly, "I can park wherever I damn well please. I make more in a day than you make in a week." Fed up, Mike called me to complain about the entitled Jerk's behavior. I agreed to stake out the spot. Driving the department's utility truck, which had decals on the door and a single red light on the dash, I parked in the emergency vehicles only spot. As I was getting out, I heard a voice behind me. "You can't park there. It's my special spot." I turned to face the entitled Jerk and calmly said, "Excuse me, I'm on official duties and I can park here." I gestured towards the decal on the door. The entitled Jerk scoffed. "You can't be a firefighter, you're a woman. Move your truck and get lost, B***********. Now, I took immense pride in my job. In a department of 2,000 firefighters, I was one of only 5 women. I had graduated at the top of my class, and the entitled Jerk's remark stung. With a shocked expression, I entered Mike's office to gather more information about the ongoing issue with the entitled Jerk. As Mike explained the continuous parking violations, I noticed a small notice regarding the upcoming fire suppression system sprinklers inspection. That's when an idea struck me, and a sly smile crept across my face. Cue the revenge. After gathering the necessary details, I returned to the station and headed straight to Chief Johnson's office. I recounted the entitled Jerk's actions and the disrespectful words he had used. Chief Johnson, a towering 6'6" and 320-pound Samoan man who treated everyone like family, turned beet red with anger. I explained my idea, and his expression shifted to one of sheer delight. He rushed out, called for a station meeting, and I laid out the plan. We would conduct a fire drill and inspection at the store by sending the old truck and 1 engine. Mike would call the station the next time the entitled Jerk parked in the fire lane. 2 weeks later, Mike called to report that the entitled Jerk had just parked in the prohibited area. As I thanked him, I heard the store's fire alarm blaring in the background. I quickly changed into my investigator uniform and turnout gear, informed Chief Johnson, and dispatched the trucks. Riding in the Quint, a combined engine and truck, we arrived to find the entitled Jerk's car parked right in the emergency vehicle spot. I radioed for 1 engine to pull up directly in front of his car and the truck to park beside the driver's side door. As I exited the vehicle, the engineer began setting up the ladder, which involved 4 large, heavy support struts, one of which crushed the front of the entitled Jerk's hood. The alarm continued to ring as the lineman broke the car's windows and ran a large 5-inch draft line from the pump to the standpipes, the fire access to the sprinkler system, through the front seats. Inside the store, I found Mike ushering people out amidst the blaring alarm. The entitled Jerk burst out of the store, saw his car, and went ballistic. I radioed dispatch, requesting a few officers to respond as a male was impeding a fire operation. The dispatcher confirmed that several officers would be sent. 3 officers arrived, and I instructed them to follow me. Spotting the entitled Jerk, I called out, "Hey, leave my firefighters alone!" He whirled around, rushed up to me, screaming that I would pay for damaging his precious baby, his car, and pushed me back. The officers and I tackled the entitled Jerk to the ground. After cuffing him, I calmly informed him that he was under arrest for assault, interference with a fire investigation, and his car would be towed for parking in a fire lane. I later found out that it had been crushed. The entitled Jerk received a 12-month probation sentence for pushing me and interfering with a fire operation. He was also fined $500 for parking illegally, plus the cost of the tow, and he lost his precious BMW. The moral of the story? Don't park where you shouldn't, or bad things will happen. The next one is an entitled people story. I've lived in my house for over 15 years and never had any issues with my neighbors or the neighborhood in general. It's a nice, quiet suburb with a mix of young families, retirees, and professionals like myself. About 2 years ago, a homeowners association was formed by a small group of bored retirees who suddenly decided they needed to control how everyone maintained their property. I opted out right away, since homeowners associations have a reputation for being run by nosy control freaks on power trips. Well, it turns out that reputation was well deserved in this case. The ringleader of the homeowners association was a woman I'll call Karen, of course, who took her self-appointed role way too seriously. She saw it as her personal mission to strictly enforce the extensive list of rules and regulations she had crafted. Things like the exact shade of paint you could use on your shutters or how many lawn ornaments were allowed in your yard. I made sure to steer clear of Karen whenever I saw her coming around the neighborhood with her clipboard and bad attitude. But that didn't stop her from zeroing in on me as one of her targets. Since I wasn't an official homeowners association member, she took it upon herself to constantly harass me for not following her absurd rules. The first incident happened about 6 months after the homeowners association formed. I was repainting my front door and had chosen a nice bold red color. The next day, I found an angry letter from Karen in my mailbox informing me that my door color was non-compliant and that I had to repaint it immediately. I crumpled up the letter and thought nothing more of it. A week later, I arrived home to find Karen herself standing on my porch with a can of beige paint. Before I could even get out of my car, she started screaming at me that my door was breaking homeowners association regulations and she was here to fix it. I calmly told her that I wasn't part of her little club and she had no authority over my home. She got right up in my face and threatened me with financial penalties if I didn't comply. At that point, I'd had enough of her bullying. I told Karen if she didn't get off my property immediately, I would call the police. That seemed to startle her, so she scurried away muttering that I hadn't seen the last of her. And boy was she right. Over the next few months, she constantly harassed me with bogus letters citing me for supposed violations. Things like my grass being half an inch too long or having too many garden gnomes. She even tried to fine me $100 for not replacing a light bulb that had burned out over my garage door. I started to worry that the situation would escalate, so I installed security cameras to keep an eye on things. Sure enough, I soon had footage of Karen sneaking onto my property and snooping around my backyard and looking in my windows. I wasted no time taking this evidence to the police and filing harassment charges. Unfortunately, they just gave her a warning since she hadn't actually done any property damage, but I hoped it would be enough to make her back off. Karen laid low for a couple weeks after that, and I thought maybe she had finally learned her lesson. No such luck. The last straw came when I arrived home late one night to discover my beloved apple tree had been chopped down. My security footage clearly showed Karen trespassing on my property earlier that evening. She had even brought along another homeowners association crony to help her cut down my tree since she hated how much shade it cast over her portion of the yard. Seeing years of precious memories destroyed in an instant made my blood boil. First thing the next morning, I took my evidence to the police station and insisted they arrest Karen this time. Thanks to the ironclad video proof, the cops finally took things seriously and hauled her away in handcuffs. At her trial a month later, the judge laid into Karen for her outrageous behavior. I testified about the relentless harassment and intimidation she had subjected me to. In the end, she was found guilty of destruction of property, fined several $1,000s, and sentenced to 6 months of probation. As an added bonus, all the negative publicity from her trial forced Karen to resign as Homeowners Association president. Last I heard, she had moved away, and the remaining Homeowners Association board members were dismantling many of her ridiculous rules. They even sent me a formal letter of apology for the misunderstandings. So in the end, justice was served. Karen's reign of terror over the neighborhood ended thanks to her own foolish arrogance, and I was able to replant a new apple tree free from harassment. This experience taught me that you can't give bullies like her an inch. I stood my ground and now I can enjoy my home in peace once again. The next one is a petty revenge story. This happened 10 years ago, but I still think about it from time to time. The plot might not be that crazy, but at the time it was a real victory for me. Background. I, then newly 18F, went shopping for a dress for my senior prom with my best friend. We decided to get the same dress in different colors to match. I now recognize this as cringy, but we were 18. It was a one-shoulder mermaid-style dress. I showed my mom the dress when I got home without actually putting it on, and I don't remember her having any sort of reaction, positive or negative. The skirt needed to be hemmed, so my mom said she would take me to her friend who does tailoring. We went to the tailoring appointment a few days later, and on the way home, I could tell she was angry. She told me that she was ashamed to be seen with me in the dress and that I had shamed her in front of her friend. I was totally blindsided because I hadn't thought of the dress as in any way scandalous, and my mom is not usually overly conservative. The dress was figure-hugging, but there were no cutouts, and it was absolutely a typical prom dress, not something that would draw special attention. She didn't forbid me from wearing it or even slash off or slash to get me something else. She just acted disappointed, and I felt like there was nothing I could do about it. I cried for a little while, but then came up with a plan. Revenge. I put the dress on Facebook Marketplace and sold it a few days later without my parents' knowledge. I did the exchange in a shopping center parking lot near my house. I didn't give a stranger my parents' address without telling them, don't worry. I got about 2-3 of my money back. I told my best friend about my plan, and she understood even though it ruined our plans to match. The weekend before the prom, I had my boyfriend drive me to a mall where there was a pop-up tuxedo rental shop, and I rented a women's tuxedo and bought cheap shoes to go with it. I had a driver's license to use for ID even though I didn't have a car. I brought my stuff home and stashed it in my closet the day of the prom, and I had my boyfriend and some friends over at my house to get ready. I hid myself from my mom while getting ready, and when everyone walked out into the yard where my mom was waiting to take pictures, I walked out last in my tux. The look on her face was incredible. She is rather homophobic and generally critical of gender non-conforming clothing, so I knew she wouldn't approve. She clearly didn't want to say anything in front of my friends, though. She pulled me aside before we left, and I told her something like, I know you didn't approve of my dress, so I decided to wear something a little more modest. I told her I'd sold the dress and gave her some money to cover the alterations, even though I think she'd gotten them free from her friend, and then turned around and walked out. We have never talked about this incident. My boyfriend's dad drove me home, and my parents were already asleep when I got there, so there was no awkward ride back. But I think my mom treated me with more respect ever after. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Karen and Ken are wealthy and extremely stingy. Their kid is Bob. Henry is an extremely sweet, generous single dad who lost his husband a few years ago and dotes on his kid Steve. I have been a nanny for several years now, and for the most part, I've worked with lovely, reasonable families. I have contracts for every family that guarantees the hours that I work, meaning if a family goes on vacation, I still get paid because I'm technically available to work, but they chose not to use my services. Think gym membership where you pay regardless of whether you've been to the gym in a month. This is standard on nanny contracts. Another bit on my contract is called the nanny share, so if 2 of the families want to combine for the day, each of them pays 2/3 of my regular pay rate. I get paid a little more for watching more kids, and they save a little only paying a portion of what they would have paid. Karen and Ken's family went to Hawaii 3 weeks ago, and per my contract, I was to be paid as usual. Before they left, they asked if I could come in and watch the Bob the Sunday after they returned so that they could recover and rest. I agreed, and my hours were set at 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. that Sunday. They went on the trip, everything was wonderful, and they texted me when they landed saying they would see me at 8 a.m. The next day, when I was about to head out the door at 7:30 a.m., I received a text saying that Bob were just waking up, so I should just show up at 8:30 instead. After the day of nannying, Karen asked if I would stay past my regular hours during the upcoming week so that they could have 2 date nights. I agreed, and Karen said she would reimburse me for all the extra hours at the end of the week since it'd be easier just to make one payment. Totally fine with me. The week finished, and I ended up staying an extra 8 hours total for the 2 date nights. I asked Ken to pay me for 16 hours, but he said he had to talk to Karen first to double-check hours and would pay me shortly. When I got home, I received a text from Karen saying, Hi Meowsosaurus, thank you so much for covering for us these past few weeks. Ken and I are feeling refreshed, and the show was hilarious. Since we were in Hawaii, you were paid for an entire week while you weren't working. We don't think this is quite fair, as it is a large sum of money, so we'd like to apply some of those hours to your babysitting today, and yesterday we will pay you for 8 hours instead. I was furious. I screenshotted the part of my contract that plainly stated I would be paid for any hours that their family was on vacation, and I reminded her that it was in violation of contract. She reluctantly agreed, and I texted that it would be a total of 16 hours. Karen instantly replied and went off, texting, On Sunday, we asked you to come in at 8:30, not 8. We are already being generous and paying you for the holiday we took. We expect you to track your hours better next time. This is unacceptable. You need to be as accurate as possible with the hours that we are paying you. We will pay you for 15.5 hours. Readers, this was a difference of $12.50. I was going to assess the part of my contract that said any rescheduling needed a 24-hour notice, but instead I went nuclear. Bob has been tagging along with Steve and me to music class and soccer twice a week outside of Karen's regular contracted hours since January. Karen has never offered to pay for those hours, but Henry was fine with paying his full rate for those hours because Steve was having trouble making friends at school and had become close to Bob. I chose not to say anything about the slight bump in pay because I loved watching them play together. Malicious compliance time. As Karen stated, I needed to be as accurate as possible. I calculated all the hours that Bob has joined us since January, 6 HR week X 18 weeks, and the total amount they owed was almost $2,000. In the group chat with Karen, Ken, and Henry, I said, Karen stated that it was of utmost importance that I track the hours as accurately as possible, so I took it upon myself to double-check everything, including the share hours. Thank goodness I did. I didn't realize we had forgotten to track all the hours that Bob joined us for soccer and music. Henry, I'm so sorry. Karen actually owes you quite a bit of money. If my calculations are correct, they owe X dollars to you and to me. Henry replied, Karen and Ken, I am so disappointed to hear that Meowsosaurus hasn't been compensated properly this entire time. I don't need my hours to be refunded for those hours because I wanted Steve to continue his playdates, but you need to pay Meowsosaurus's portion immediately. I got a huge chunk of money I wasn't expecting, and I am now on the hunt for my next nanny family. I'll be putting my 2 weeks notice with Karen and Ken as soon as I do. The next one is an entitled people story, so I, 27, just remembered this since I was talking with one of my online best friends earlier. I've had problems with food since I was 11. I would go all day without eating and then indulge on food when I get home from school. And it honestly affected me, physically and emotionally. I was forced by my abusive dad to stop doing track, because he said that it was a waste of time. Honestly, every club I joined was a waste of time to him. Anyway, since I stopped running, it affected my weight. I literally stopped jogging every morning or doing anything active, and my relatives would comment on my weight a lot. Imagine telling an 11-year-old that they're too fat. Yeah, no. Well, because of that, I stopped bringing food to school. At age 10, I was already expected to take care of myself. That includes making my own school lunch. It actually got to the point where my homeroom teacher would give me money so I can buy food in the cafeteria. Well, fast forward to now. I still have a bad relationship with food. When I was working a corporate job, I would hoard food on my desk and locker, and honestly, still am, obese. But recently, I was so proud of myself. Since 2022 until now, I've lost 20 to 30 pounds, and I was improving my relationship with food. I wasn't hoarding food anymore. I was walking 1-2 kms a day. I had a system. It was working. I was telling it to my internet friends too. They were so happy for me. They are aware of my situation too. Then, of course, my relatives saw the improvement. One time, I was in the living room, which is rare since I usually lock myself in my room, eating lunch. And they made a comment how I was pigging out. And it hurt. A lot. I ignored it. But yeah. Then came the food accusations. They would make food that's too much for us. My kind uncle would give me some of the food in secret, but the rest of the family would know. And they would idiot at me how I'm eating their food when they use some of the food I buy. So me, getting pissed, would stop eating and would just go back in my room. And then I'd go back to buying canned food and bread. And with me not eating their food, the food would spoil because they expect me to put their leftovers in the fridge. But the thing is, I barely go to the kitchen at that point, and they would also complain how no one's eating the food and just letting it spoil. And then another incident where, because they got pissed at me over something, I can tell what happened next time. I stopped going out of my room for a week. I got sick at that time, and I have this awful habit of locking myself in my room when I know they're furious. They shout when they're angry, and I'm completely terrified of getting shouted at. And yeah, I had not eaten anything for nearly a week. I probably lived off on 2 pieces of bread and water. My friends found out about it because I mentioned I needed to buy bread or something. Just plain bread, because my leftover bread was stale. At that time, my best friend sent me money to eat. I honestly didn't want to, but she knows my online bank since we've sent each other money multiple times in the past. It was the first time in 6 days I actually had a proper meal. To say that I cried when I bought an actual meal was an understatement. And today I'm back to bread, but now I've paired it with fried rice. Even though I'm getting sick and tired of rice and bread, it does make me feel full. But I've gone back to my food hoarding days. I'm here in my room hiding my food because I know that if I leave it in the kitchen, they will eat it. I mean, I don't mind sharing. I always make sure I have something for them whenever I have the money, buying them treats and all. But my meals for the day are for me alone. Well, that's all. I hope I can fix my relationship with food again once I move out. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.